Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the launch of Farewell Inc. by MJ McGrath. And it's a great pleasure to do the honours here. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to the CEO of the Writers' Centre, Dominic Taylor.
Nice to meet you, Tom. As Tom said, my name is Dominic Taylor and I'm the Director of the Limerick Writers' Centre. First of all, I'd just like to say thanks to William O'Neill here and the staff of the People's Museum for hosting this launch here this evening. As you're aware, the book we are launching this evening is Farewell Inc., the latest collection of short stories by Michael McGrath, and is published by us, the Limerick Writers' Centre. And I'd like to say a little bit about the work of the Centre. Limerick Writers' Centre was established in 2008, and in the 14 years since, our aim has been to carve out a distinctive position in relation to writing and literature in Limerick. Most people who are aware of our work will know that we willingly embrace and encourage diverse voices across the community. We encourage everyone's creativity, and we believe that writing and literature, whether in the form of poetry or prose, matters, and does, as Seamus Heaney suggests, function as bearers of value. And one of the ways we support writing and literature in Limerick is through our small independent community publishing project. And the book we are publishing here tonight is the 134th title that we have published since 2008. As I'm sure you're aware, mainstream publishing today is dominated by a few large conglomerates and is largely a matter of profitability as to whether books get published or not. But strange, crazy, intellectually innovative or experimental books are published in small to medium-sized print runs, and that is the task of the smaller houses such as ourselves. Small publishing houses are not made up of marketing and PR experts. They're staffed by people who do books because of their passions or strong opinions, certainly not because of the profits that might generate. They publish books that otherwise would not get published at all. A few years ago, the demise of the printed book was confidently predicted as electronic books rose to prominence. Well, publishers are still publishing paper books, booksellers are still selling paper books, and libraries are still full of printed books. The printing of books may be an old technology, but in my view, it is still cutting edge and offers an enhanced experience for readers. It is in this context that I think it is appropriate that we celebrate here tonight Michael McGrath and the launch of his book, Farewell Inc. I'm delighted to see so many here, and I would encourage you to buy a copy, and maybe one also for a Christmas present for someone, because it is through the sale of books, like Michael's, that we can continue to reinvest and publish new writers. So when you buy Michael's book, you're not just supporting him, you're supporting other local writers also. To conclude, I'd just like to thank a number of people who helped make this occasion a success. As mentioned earlier, William O'Neill and the staff here at the museum, also to Owen Devereux, who will shortly officially launch Farewell Inc., and to my colleagues at the Limerick Writers' Centre, especially Lot Bender, for her work in not only designing this book, but also our other titles as well. Thank you very much. So I'd just like to invite Owen Devereux up now to officially launch the book.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Owen Devereux. I'm a professor by day at the University of Limerick, and I remember Mike from UL. He reminded me when we were chatting by email a couple of weeks ago. He knew me from about there. I'm also a writer, creative writer, and I've had involvement with the Limerick Writers' Centre, most recently this year with the publication of the poetry broadsheet, April is the Cruelest Month, as part of Poetry Month. And I would just reiterate what Dominic has said, community-based publishing houses that publish small print runs, that might publish radical ideas, might publish writers and different kinds of writing that mightn't otherwise be published. And I have a particular affinity with Limerick Writers' Centre. It has had some success in terms of some of the writers it has published in poetry and in short fiction. And I think probably as importantly, it has nurtured writing amongst the older population, amongst retirees, amongst young men and women battling addiction, a whole range of things the Writers' Centre have been involved in, and I really do commend their work. And I do sound like a broken record because Dominic will sometimes ask me to speak or to launch or to be involved with events with the Writers' Centre, and I always begin by saying how it is criminal that this writer's this imprint is not supported officially, in terms of the city in any meaningful way. And Dominic has certainly the last number of years single-handedly led Limerick Writers' Centre, and your energy and your stamina and your staying power in terms of publishing, Dominic, is to be commended, and the work of the centre. So I want to begin by welcoming Mike, obviously the author. The launch of a book is always a very important occasion in the life of any writer. So I want to welcome Mike and his friends and his family. And I want to start really by warmly welcoming this book, this second collection of short stories by Mike. As you will know, Mike is a novelist, a playwright, a poet, and a short story writer, and his work has featured in many, many publications such as Roadside Fiction, Writing Raw, The Ohm Stone, and Literature Today. His first novel, The Clock Tower, was released in 2017, and this was followed by his debut short story collection, All About Town, published by the Limerick Writers' Centre in 2019. He's also a poet, so he's quite a versatile writer, and his debut poetry collection, Enjoy the Rain, was published in 2021. He's also a podcaster and a secondary school teacher, so also a person of incredible energy and devotion to his craft. The book arrived at home. Mike had sent me a PDF copy of the book, and I had started to read, and then the postman arrived with a parcel, and in the parcel was Farewell ink. And I am very much a hands-on person in terms of reading, so I started reading the book, and I've really, really enjoyed reading the stories. After poetry, the short story as a form, it's my favourite literary genre. At their best, like the stories in this collection, short stories usually have an economy of scale. James Joyce talked about short stories having a meanness because they're short, because of their brevity. I suppose in some respects, unlike writing a big novel or a big fantasy novel, for example, you can't hide behind sort of long, complicated narratives. The short story really forces you to distill, the essence of the story. And of course, the best short stories end with a revelation. They end with an epiphany. James Joyce, as I've mentioned, was very strong on the idea of the epiphany, most notably in the most celebrated collection of short stories, Dubliners. And we know from Joyce that the epiphany, the revelation, the surprise in the story is what really makes it work. And like, I think, the best poetry, the short story works most effectively when it brings new insights into the human condition. Mike's latest collection then really appealed to me as a reader. And I was asking Mike actually when I arrived in, where the usual thing, where are you from, right? So, the Limerick thing of placing somebody. And I for some reason in my head, because of the stories, I had thought that you were from the East Coast, that you were from Wicklow or Wexford. And you're not, you're from County Limerick. And the stories, being set in the East Coast of Ireland, they're written really convincingly. Your attention to detail in those stories is really, really impressive. So what we get are mini portraits of towns, of places, of the tourist trail in places like Wicklow, Wexford and Dublin. I am particularly fond of the story, the Dixie Dollar, and I have a Wexford, well, it's a Norman French surname, but we originally are from Enniscorthy, so I smiled when the tour bus ended up in Enniscorthy in the middle of that story. I really like the collection, and I mentioned the Dixie Dollar. I particularly liked that story, and I liked very much the story The Web and The Circle and The Sea. And I think the reason these stories appeal to me and they spoke to me is their lyricism and their poetry. So your capacity to distill, your capacity to create an epiphany. So here you are finishing one of the stories. They stood a while and felt the skin on each other's fingers, watching the water stretch out from their safe shores to unseen features beyond the horizon. Forever unknown, somewhere in Dublin port, a cargo ship bellowed and lowered its anchor for the final time into dark, unmoving waters. And I was there, I could see it. It was so beautifully written. Again, no longer lost to heaven or earth, Father Cleary tipped the box into the thin atmosphere above Wicklow and watched the ash empty into a cool breeze. With gratitude, the old priest allowed tears to roll down his cheeks and nestle in the white hairs of his beard, mortal and delicate as the swirling dust. So there's a beauty, there's an economy in those sentences which really, really, really works. The collection is a really beautiful collection, and it's appealing to me because the stories across the collection are populated really by people like all of us. They're populated by ordinary, complex, flawed characters, which of course is what being human is all about. And my recurring thought as I was reading the stories was that for me, actually, the recurring character, if you want to call it a character or characters plural, is actually water. So the descriptions of sea, the descriptions of lakes, of rivers, and that really, really spoke to me. So water is present in so many of the stories. The title is appropriate also, of course, because of the nature of what these stories are about. And the idea of farewells, of goodbyes, either permanent goodbyes when somebody dies, or a goodbye in the sense of someone leaving you and going out of your life and not being in contact with you anymore. And this really, really spoke to me again, because I've been thinking a lot in the last number of years in my own writing about how sometimes the conversations we have with people don't actually begin until they are gone. So it is when they are gone, so whether that's a parent or a friend or a lover, whatever it is, sometimes the discourses we have only begin when people are long gone, when the farewell ink has actually dried. So Mike, I really want to commend you on this beautiful collection of short stories. It's a very, very impressive read. I would encourage all of you here to buy not only one copy, certainly buy 2 copies, as Dominic said, not even necessarily for Christmas, but spread the word about this collection of stories. It's a wonderful collection. Congratulations, Mike, on it. And I should also have said at the very outset that I was particularly honoured to be asked to launch the book. I was really chuffed to be asked to launch it. It's a beautiful collection of stories. Well done. Congrats.
Thank you very much, Owen Devereux. Now, Michael John M.J. McGrath is an Irish novelist, playwright, poet and short story writer who's had his work featured in publications such as Roadside Fiction, Writing Raw, The Own Stone and Literature Today. His first novel, The Clock Tower, was released in 2017, and this was followed by his debut short story collection All About Town, Limerick Writers Centre, in 2019. His debut poetry collection, Enjoy the Rain, was released in 2021. He is the founder and presenter of the Sleep with MJ podcast on Acast. Ladies and gentlemen, MJ McGrath.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. Thank you very much, Owen, for your lovely words as well. And I'd just like to say thank you for everybody that's here today to support me. And of course to Dominic and to the Limerick Writers Centre for all the good work that they do and have done for many years now in the city. We're very fortunate to have them here. So what I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to read one story from the collection. And I, of course, Owen kind of caught me out there because he read a bit of it himself. I wasn't expecting that. But we'll manage away anyway, don't worry. So it's often hard when you get to this situation when you think about like what story to pick out of the collection. There's 10 of them there. And of course, some of them are too short, some of them are too long, so they kind of get immediately excluded. They're not going to be here for half an hour talking, but I don't want to be here for 2 minutes either, because there is one of them that's actually literally just over a page. So there's 2 of them that are automatically excluded. So you start to whittle it down. There was 1 or 2 then as well that I've read on the podcast. I didn't want to do them either. I wanted to do something that certainly no one here would have heard of before. So I landed eventually on a story called, I'll get it here now, called A Parting in Wicklow. Okay, and it's of course it's about farewells as the rest of the stories are about, and as Owen was saying, some of the farewells are permanent ones. They're to do with the ultimate farewell, but a lot of them then of course are about farewells, be it in a romantic relationship setting or to a friendship, or all of these things that we all experience at some point in our lives. So without further ado, I'll just let the story talk for itself. Okay, A Parting in Wicklow. Father Cleary stood at the base of the Sugarloaf Mountain with a tin box in his hand. The day was beginning to break on the surrounding grasslands, and a mild breeze tickled the hairs of his white beard. Though an unusual custom for a priest, it was now his habit to be away from the parish every year on the feast of St. Stephen's Day. He had never enjoyed the seasonal antics since the early years of his childhood. The mornings were dreary, and his mother would encourage him to go singing door to door with the Wren boys in order to get him out of his shell. It irked him that the more boisterous children in the parish could be found rapping at the door as soon as early mass was finished, crowing away at some old hymn with their muddy fingers outstretched for coins. Young Cleary could never see the presence of God in such activities. "Would you not get out from under my feet, Jack, and head out with the boys and collect a few shillings for yourself?" his mother would implore him with a pained face. His father was more understanding to his son's position and would speak from behind the cover of an old newspaper. "It's a form of legitimised begging, Mary, and nothing short of it. You'd run the itinerants from the door every other day of the year, and yet you expect poor Jack to go to take to the roads now." His mother would huff and bang pots in the kitchen, frustrated at both her husband and son's lack of enterprise. However, their small dry cattle farm in West Cork supported them with relative ease and reared both their sons. Martin, who was 8 years Jack's senior, would eventually take over the running of the old family farm, while his younger brother joined the priesthood. Upon his ordination, Father Cleary was posted to the parishes in Dublin before being sent to Arklow in County Wicklow, where he had remained ever since. He enjoyed being nestled between the sea and the mountains, would go on solitary walks whenever time and the weather permitted him. Though he supposed his parishioners saw him as a recluse in his spare time, he had built a decent rapport with the majority of them and was well liked in the town. Yet in recent years, he knew his voluntary solitude owed much to his struggles with the absence of God in his daily life, as though every feast were St. Stephen's Day, an empty custom menaced his faith. And today was St. Stephen's Day. His dislike of it had followed him from his childhood and threw a dark lens on his adult perspective. Though mercifully waning as a tradition, the Wren boys and girls still called to the parochial house, and he felt a weight of expectation to be courteous and kind in the face of their materialistic advances. The pubs in the town would be jammed with families and acquaintances who were home for Christmas, and trouble was never far away. So long as it was the guards and not a priest who was called upon, Father Cleary supposed it would be a successful evening. But those concerns could wait until later. As was his custom on this one day over Christmas, he had passed his morning duties on to Father O'Brien, and now, many miles away from his parishioners, he exhaled at the foot of the Sugarloaf Mountain. Wrapped tightly in his grey winter coat and woolen hat, he used his umbrella as a walking stick for his right hand, while in his left he carried a small tin box. The box contained the ashes of his beloved pet and friend. He didn't know what age Trixie was. He had bound into his life almost 10 years ago when his previous owner, Mrs. Morrison, had passed away. Mrs. Morrison's only daughter lived in Liverpool and had pleaded with the priest to take the dog, or she would have to get it put down or placed in the pound. Father clearly resisted, scratching at his scraggy white beard. Jack Russells are very yappy little things. He could be intimidating to the parishioners calling to the house. It was no use, of course. Despite his often stern demeanour, Father Cleary had difficulty masking his affection for animals. After an hour of plumosing him over the phone, Mrs. Morrison's English daughter got her wish, and Trixie was duly deposited at the front door of the parochial house. Father Cleary's misgivings about the nature of Jack Russell's proved unfortunately prophetic, and the young terrier made strange with his new surroundings and owner during the first few weeks in his new abode. Despite being assured that he was trained, the dog left solid and liquid gifts all about the tiles and carpets throughout the day. Father Cleary's part-time housekeeper, Mrs. Quinn, was aggrieved by the position of having an animal around the home. The hostility was mutual, and Trixie nipped at her ankles while she stood at the kitchen sink. Father Cleary was forced to plead clemency for the dog and assured Mrs. Quinn that he merely missed his owner and would settle into his new home in a matter of weeks. Fortunately for Trixie, this proved to be the case, and within a month he began to quieten down and accept the comforts of clerical life. Father Cleary wrote up a list of chores connected to Trixie and stuck it to the fridge to remind Mrs. Quinn of his daily needs. Feeding times were to be regulated, with different meals for each day to ensure he didn't get bored. The sheet in his basket was to be changed every second day, and he needed to be walked around the park so he could go to the toilet at least a half an hour before dinner. Father Cleary's clerical duties would often slacken off midweek, and it was then that he would take to the road in his black Nissan Primera with Trixie up front. He tied his lead to the headrest of the passenger seat and kept a cushion to put underneath the dog so that he could see the rolling countryside go by. They visited their favourite trails multiple times each year around the East Coast seaside towns, as well as Glendalough and the Vale of Avoca. And though the terrier enjoyed both land and sea, Father Cleary noted that one area in particular invoked a special delight. Trixie's excited yelps and the frantic whipping of his tail would reach their zenith whenever the priest switched off the engine at the base of the Sugarloaf Mountain. With lolling tongue and panting air against the window, the dog would take in the fin-shaped summit with the zeal of one who was bearing witness to a spiritual awakening. Despite often mulling it over, Father Cleary could think of no discernible reasoning for this affection towards the mountain. It was a strange quirk in the animal, though now it had at least given him a natural location over which to spread the ashes of his dear pet. Making his way from the tufts of the loose stones of the pathway, the priest rubbed his beard and cast his eyes upwards to the distinctive summit before setting his watch. Despite its prominence to the surrounding countryside, the mountain could be scaled easily in less than an hour, as the car park was situated high above sea level. A flat stone jutted from a rocky hill face 10 minutes into the climb, and Father Cleary glimpsed Trixie's silhouette atop of it. Glancing back towards him, waiting for his master to drag his old bones up the steep incline. When he would finally reach him, the priest would look and take a rest on the rock and hold Trixie in his arms, as there was only enough room for one of them. Here the dog would dart his head at various sounds and the passing of people, and Father Cleary leaned his face against the warm hair on his back. The beating of his little heart was rapid and frantic. Was that it? The priest whispered, now poking the empty stone with the tip of his umbrella. The heart has a finite number of beats, and Trixie was busy using them up, even when at rest in his master's arms. If only gazing over the Wicklow countryside and the span of the Irish Sea could have slowed them down. Maybe he could have added four more weeks into his brief time in the midst of all creation. Beautiful as it was, though less beautiful without him. When he had found the dog that morning on the kitchen tiles, Father Cleary knew that his time on earth had expired. His body was cold, stiffness already setting into his neck as his head was gently raised. Weeping uncontrollably, the priest whispered an act of contrition in his ear, doubtful of his soul. Silly man, he thought, continuing his hike up the mountain. What would the bishop say if he told him that? What would the bishop say if he told him about the absence of God in his life and everything he experienced? Too much solitude is what he would say. He would then suggest spending some more time amongst his flock out in the community. Yet Father Cleary liked time to himself whenever he could, and Trixie was the perfect companion to loneliness. Friendly and loyal, and unlike many human acquaintances, he would never trouble him about the direction of his moral pathways, or ask about his absolution in the eyes of God. And there was a lot to be said for that. Father Cleary smiled to himself as he approached a shallow gorge which signalled the final ascent. A number of middle-aged hikers were gingerly stepping their way back down, and he stood to one side to make way for them. They thanked him with warm smiles, ran their eyes over his form, and called him Father upon seeing the collar protruding from his jacket. And was he not their father? He asked himself, hands now being used to grip the rock on this final stretch, while still balancing the tin box. Cold mud and pebbles ground against his palms. Was he not a father to many? A universal paternity that was marked by the absence of God. On many winter nights back at the parochial house, long hours were passed by the open fire with his theology books and whiskey. In wild discourse with his Creator, he raged and pleaded for answers he knew to be articles of faith alone. Yet still, he called for clarity in a storm as the windows rattled in their frames and the flames licked the chimney. A few steps from the summit, he gripped the tin box close to his chest, as he had done with Trixie's body in life. The fine ash which slid inside was from the remnants of one not forged in the image of his Creator, an expired beast, not dissimilar from himself, with a soul as much in doubt. Westerly winds whipped round the mountaintop upon Father Cleary's arrival, driven by fronts gusting from the Irish Sea, its green expanse stretching to a smoky grey horizon. Narrowing his eyes against the biting breeze, his gaze ran north along the shoreline to where pastoral green gave way to the dark mass of the city. Through the haze, intermittent flashes of light from the funnels of Poolbeg Tower station broke through the surrounding clouds. A tired town. Casting his eyes towards again the garden of Wicklow, Father Cleary placed the tin box on a flat patch of ground and sat on his haunches beside it. Time to say goodbye now, old friend, he thought, to the humble container. A sliver of the sun's disk broke through the cloud as he gazed down at its reflection on the box's lid. Smouldering like gunpowder, the presence of God, so absent from his final days, finally sparked and burst forth in every past moment with his little companion. The joy of affection, love and acceptance. Yes, he smiled. He understood now the presence of God. In moments, as he opened the lid, Trixie's gift to him blazed through his memories, and he thanked his friend for the divinity that had suddenly swelled in his heart. With the morning's rise, the slim edge of the sun broke to a crescent and poured along the hinterland of the Pale, chasing shadows from valleys and sleeping towns up the coast to the mouth of the Liffey. No longer lost to heaven or earth, Father Cleary tipped the box into the thin atmosphere above Wicklow and watched the ash empty into a cool breeze. With gratitude, the old priest allowed tears to roll down his cheeks and nestle in the white hairs of his beard, mortal and delicate as the swirling dust. Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed that. So that was it's a story from the middle of the book, and I thought that I choose it because it sort of, I think it kind of encapsulates a lot of the stories that are in the book, as in the sense that there's obviously it's about a farewell, but it's about a farewell I think that that maybe will be kind of underplayed maybe by the public, you know. So if you were to know Father Cleary, if he was a person and he was to tell you that story, but tell you in a kind of an offhand way that his dog had died or whatever, you might not think too much of it. But of course, as we all know, strange things happen to us sometimes, and there's things that go on in our heads when we do say goodbye to people or to animals or whatever the case may be, whereas it mightn't seem like it's going to have a big effect on you, but it does. And so that was kind of the idea of picking that story. So once again, I just want to say thanks to everybody for being here tonight. It's very much appreciated, and hope that you do enjoy the book, and if you have any questions for me or anything like that, you let me know at the end, and I'll be happy to take them. And for now, I shall go over there and I shall sign all your copies of your books, which I'm sure you're going to buy lots of. So thanks very much again, and I'll talk to you again.
Once again, the author has preempted anything I might say. Yes, indeed. Follow his learned instructions. Buy the book. Keep him and the publisher out of penury for at least a day. Now then, forthcoming attraction, another author on our stocks is Mr. Dennis O'Shaughnessy, and he is launching The Poster. It's an eclectic collection of short stories, several with a Limerick background. And it's next Thursday, 17th of November at 7:45 p.m. in O'Driscoll's Lounge Bar, Corby. Be there or be square. Good night.